5 Guns West. 5 condemned men who traded a sentence to die for a 1,000-to-1 chance to live. Starring John Lund, a man dedicated to a desperate cause, and Dorothy Malone, a girl destined to know all the pleasures and pains of love. With Touch Connors, Paul Birch, Bob Campbell, and Jonothon Haze. All men who had lived too long away from any woman.
Stop, please.
All I want's a little kiss. I ask you nice and you got high about it. I ain't asking you now. Yeah! Snake is coming.
Suspense grows into nerve-breaking tension when you fight with daring men.
Hello! Stand where you are. Throw down your guns.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
We'd like to welcome you once again to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And in this episode, we saddle up to ride out west with a quintet of desperados on a mission in 5 Guns West from 1955.
5 Guns West was directed by Roger Corman from a screenplay by R. Wright Campbell. It was produced by Roger Corman for Palo Alto Productions and released by American Releasing Corporation.
It's an early one. 5 Guns West stars John Lund as Governor Sturges, Dorothy Malone as Shalee, Touch Connors as Hale Clinton, Bob Campbell as John Morgan Candy, Jonothon Haze as Billy Candy, Paul Birch as J.C. Haggard, James Stone as Uncle Mime.
Also appearing are Jack Ingram as Stephen Jethro, Larry Thor as the Confederate captain, and an uncredited James B. Sikking as the Union sergeant.
5 Guns West opens in glorious color with the words Roger Corman presents, and then 5 hands holding guns, aim them above our heads, and fire as the credits begin. And Buddy Bregman's score swells magnificently.
After the credits, words appear on the screen that tell us that, desperate for men during the last days of the war between the states, the South found it necessary to offer pardons to outlaws to carry out special assignments. Strange dark figures rode under the flag of the Confederacy.
Yeah, the results, as you might expect, would prove problematic in certain cases. At a Confederate camp, a couple of men ride in, and we see 2 more lounging in a wagon until a soldier hustles them into formation with all the others. One of the men, named Hale Clinton, razzes the 2 in the wagon. This is John Morgan Candy and his brother Billy. I say John Morgan because saying John Candy just makes you think of someone else entirely, but that's his name.
Then the men are lined up, and they have a brief roll call and are given pardons, as we are introduced to each of these characters. First up is Wiliam Parcell Candy. He was convicted of murdering and robbing 4 persons in San Antonio. He was sentenced to hang by the neck until dead, but he is now pardoned.
Wow, what a break. John Candy was suspected of helping his brother do those murders, but he was acquitted for that charge. So he would have been okay, but he killed 2 law enforcement officers trying to boost Billy out of jail. He was also sentenced to hang and is now pardoned.
Next up is J.C. Haggard. He's an older gentleman. He was a wrestler sentenced to 20 years of hard labor. As his rap sheet is rattled off, he has commentary on each charge.
Apparently he caused the death of 7 men while being arrested, but he didn't actually kill anybody. But he was committing a crime, and as he was being apprehended, people died, and that was laid at his feet.
But it doesn't matter now because he is also pardoned.
He was only going to serve 20 years, though. He was not sentenced to die, one of the few.
Oh, he said that he would have been fine doing it.
A little wishful thinking, I think. And then we have Hale Clinton. I mentioned him earlier. He shot and killed an unarmed man after a dispute over cards. He was also sentenced to be hanged and subsequently pardoned here.
I mentioned last as Governor Sturges. He was convicted of murder, sentenced to be hung by the neck until dead, and he is now pardoned.
Yeah, he was a career highwayman who held up a stage and killed 5 people: the driver, the shotgun, and the passengers.
The 5 men are asked to step forward, raise their right hands, and take an oath.
Their oath is to the Confederate Army. So now they are soldiers, and immediately they find out what their mission is. They're tasked to go to Dawn Springs and waylay a stage containing one Stephen Jethro by the 18th of this month.
Steve and Jethro is carrying information that they don't want to see delivered to the north, so they have been brought together to stop the stagecoach at any cost.
J.C. Haggard immediately throws out an objection. That's a hard ride over a short time through lands rife with Native Americans. Now they're going to say Indians and even Injuns a few times in this movie, but we'll try to change it for modern reality. The captain then reminds J.C. and the others that they were hired for their special skills, so they should just learn to cope with it.
Govern asks how they want them to deliver Steve and Jethro. Alive if possible, dead if need be, replies the captain.
At that, Billy grins widely and wildly. This mission really speaks to him. It's really hard to know where we are right now and where they end up in this movie, because the stagecoach is headed from San Francisco to Fort Mahan, and that's near Washington, D.C. So we could basically be anywhere. I mean, we know they're actually in California right now, but I don't think that's where they're supposed to be, because they're Confederates.
Governor asks if there's anything else that they should know, and the captain continues that the stagecoach will be escorted by Northern cavalry. So Governor assesses this information. All they have to do is make a 4-day ride in 3 days, through Comanche territory, hold up a stagecoach guarded by Northern troops, and capture and bring back Steve and Jethro for some Southern justice.
The plains are just crawling with warriors hungry for white scalps, he says. And that is kind of a tall order. But the captain says that they all got spared just punishment, even death, and also they're going to be saving a lot of Southern lives if they manage to keep this information from reaching Union HQ. And then he pings everybody's interest by saying there's also $30,000 on that stage, which they need for the cause.
Hale Clinton asks if that $30,000 is in gold bullion or Southern script. It's hard money, says the captain.
Woohoo!
Part of Jethro's assignment was to deliver the money to the Northern troops. So the men start off on their mission. A soldier asks the captain if he thinks those killers can do this job. Those men are Southern soldiers, says the captain. Do you think those patriots can do the job? The man corrects. The captain simply replies that Steve and Jethro must be stopped.
And now we're off riding with the 5 guns. Seconds later, it seems, Govern consults their trailblazer, J.C., who says that if they go one way, there may be more Native Americans there, but they'll get to their destination faster. However, if they go the other way, it's safer, but it's going to take longer. Govern thinks that going the faster way is better. There's unlikely to be that many Native Americans this far south.
Are you making up our minds for us? Asks Hale.
This is not the last time that Hale is going to object to Govern's leadership.
Govern says that he's taking the short route, and Hale can go whichever way he prefers.
And so they ride on. As they're riding, Billy points out a good hanging tree to his brother. John's not interested in looking at it, and mocks his dumb brother for messing up his crime and getting John involved. When Billy objects to being told to shut up, John just rides off.
The Candies ride ahead to join the others, who are still deciding on which route they'll be taking. Hale says it seems that Govern has made himself the leader of their little group, and the short route is okay with him, but he warns Govern not to get any funny ideas once they've got that $30,000 in their hands.
Also, I noticed here that Billy seems really excited that he gets a free pass to kill somebody. It looks like nobody's planning on the or alive option. JC tells the others that they shouldn't start mentally splitting up all that cash just yet. They have a long way to go, and a lot of potential hazards lie ahead.
Native Americans, Northern cavalry, and of course the killing that nature provides.
And so they ride on. It still seems like seconds later they're stopping again, the way this is paced.
Not too much time goes by before they stop once again. Govern dismounts his horse when he sees a broken arrow on the ground. JC reckons it's Comanche and it was left here 4 or 5 days ago. They say the war has given the Native Americans plenty of time to move around, even though they're rarely seen this far south.
I wonder where we are. Then Govern decides to camp here. Hale asks if it isn't dangerous with all those Native Americans about. But JC figures that they won't be spotted, for whatever reason.
Hale tells Billy to get some firewood, calling him Shorty in the process. Don't call me Shorty, says Billy. I don't like it.
But his brother commands him to pick up sticks.
Go get some wood, interrupts his brother. Billy falls silent and goes to do what he's been told.
Not with a smile on his face. Later, as the fire burns, Crazy Billy remarks how the red flames remind him of a redhead he had killed. Then the fire turns blood red to him. Yikes.
Just think it. Don't say it, says John.
Those are inside thoughts.
Hale says that Billy sounds loco. Billy suddenly throws a knife in Hale's direction. Hale reaches for his gun. I'll kill you, he says, but Govern holds him back. You ought to thank him instead. Look. The knife that Billy had thrown has pinned a rattlesnake to the dirt beside Hale. Billy goes over to retrieve his knife and keeps the rattle as a trophy. He shakes it in Hale's face. Thanks, says Hale.
The next morning, Hale sits down next to Govern for some coffee and chit-chat. Hale is mighty interested in Govern's time in the pokey, but Govern is sparing with the details. He doesn't want to talk about getting his neck stretched at breakfast time. The Hale then says that Billy's crazy, but Govern thinks that Billy's brother has him leashed pretty well, at least well enough.
JC comes over to join them, and he reminisces about drinking coffee on the trail. Seems like old times, he says. Nearby, Billy is suggesting to John that the two of them could take on the other three, rob the coach themselves, and then take the money and run. John says that right now, the other three are useful. They'll be entering dangerous territory, and there'll be plenty of time to cut down the others after they've taken the stage.
Back at the fire, JC is telling others that back in the day he fought the heat and the cold, but then his child died of plague and his woman was killed by what he says is an Indian's arrow. Then the Candies join the others around the campfire. Billy jokes about that snake and Hale calls him Shorty again.
Billy throws his coffee into Hale's face. I told you, I don't like being called Shorty. Hale reaches for his gun and Billy for his. Govern disarms Hale and John does the same to Billy, so Billy charges at Hale for some hand-to-hand.
Mano a mano.
Except Billy still has that knife. They wrestle and Hale manages to disarm Billy. Then John conks Billy over the head, knocking him cold. You Candies are a strange lot, says Hale. You knocked on your brother to keep me from hurting him. I wasn't worried about you hurting him, says John, pulling a shiv from Billy's boot. Then John dumps some water from his canteen on Billy's face to wake him up.
Billy wakes, offended that his brother did what he did. Govern tells them all that the next man who pulls a gun will not keep it. Billy growls that no one's going to take his gun, but Govern assures him that yes, they will.
He doesn't want anyone firing any guns and bringing their attention to the Comanche. Govern tells JC to go and fill the canteen, so they'll be moving on soon. Hale volunteers to help JC, but before he leaves, Govern returns Hale's gun, advising him not to call Billy Shorty anymore.
At the watering hole, Hale tries some friendly small talk with JC. He wants to know what the JC stands for, but it's just JC. His parents had a lot of kids and zero imagination. Hale pours on some flattery, but JC is wise to Hale's game and doesn't want to play it. But Hale offers up a proposition. How about they team up against the others?
Then they could split the $30,000 between the two of them.
He asks what the others will be doing as they share the gold, and Hale says nothing. Just nothing.
JC doesn't accept the offer, but he doesn't turn it down either. Now I know what JC stands for, says Hale. Just cautious.
For her. Now John Morgan Candy reports to Govern that he heard JC and Hale making a private deal. Then John proposes that the three of them, him, Billy, and Govern, split the gold 3 ways. As the others return, Govern says maybe.
John walks away as Hale comes over. He hands Govern his canteen and says that Govern's been talking to the wrong guys. The Candies won't be walking away from any showdown that might occur. What makes you think there will be a showdown, asks Govern. But given their present company, what are the odds that there won't be a showdown? Hale suggests that Govern join him and JC, and Govern says he might just have himself a deal.
Yeah, there should be 3 guns aimed at the 2 brothers, or they'll all be dead, with no gold.
As they begin to ride off once again, Govern warns everyone not to string out too far. Those Comanche like to pick off the last man.
A while later, they come across some burnt-out trees and scrub. Billy takes out his gun, fires upward, and kills a bird. Hale turns back and grabs Billy's gun and knocks him to the ground, and says that now every Native American in 5 miles will be onto them.
As Govern approaches Billy, John steps on Billy's hand, preventing him from using the knife that he's pulled. Govern tells John to let him go. You're asking for it, says John, releasing his brother. Billy jumps up and starts to lunge at Govern, but then he hesitates. Go for it, says Govern. No, says Billy. He puts down the knife. Can I have my gun back now? He asks, and Govern returns it.
When Govern returns to where Hale is on his horse, Hale tells Govern that he has a loyal dog now. A rabbit dog, but loyal. And then they ride on.
Again, they stop when they find a dead Union soldier, the victim of a Comanche spear. They'll have to be cautious.
And then they ride on. Later, they stop again so Govern can look at some stock footage of Native Americans from some other movie. And then they ride on.
A little faster this time. But Billy has fallen behind. As he rides between a rock formation, a Comanche Indian jumps from above and pulls Billy from his horse. Billy finally gets to use that knife as he plunges it several times into the Comanche. Then he looks over the hill and he sees that same stock footage of Comanches on the warpath.
I think it's different footage this time. I think he mixed it up a little bit. He returns to his kill, gets his knife, cleans it, and then the others find him smoking a cigarette. Billy demands and gets praise for not shooting and reports on the Comanche that he saw. So Govern says that they should try a different route, and they should also ride off alone so as not to kick up so much dust. Hale asks, suppose they catch one of us. Billy says, well, we'll hear it, and we'll feel real bad.
They'll go down to the river one at a time and meet up there. JC goes first, followed by Hale, then John, then Billy. and Govern goes last. When they've all arrived, Govern tells them that they'll camp here till midnight. The Candy brothers will take the first watch, Govern will take the second, then they'll start riding again at midnight to make up for the lost time. Hale asks if anyone is up for a game of cards, and Govern suggests they all better get some sleep instead. I don't think any of us are going to get any sleep tonight, says Hale. I will, says Govern.
At their post as lookouts, Billy declares it's quiet out there. Then he wants to marvel at how close they came to getting hung. John doesn't want to talk about that, though. John asks Billy why he didn't stab Govern. Billy says because he seemed not to care if Billy killed him or not. John Morgan says that they have a deal with him against the others, and this pleases Billy.
Later, when it's Govern's turn to stand watch, John wakes him up by pointing his rifle at Govern's head. Your turn, says John. Then at midnight, they start riding, and they ride until dawn. Now we're in Dawn Springs, a small former mining town, and a stopover for the stage carrying Steve and Jethro and that $30,000.
This is Dawn Springs, population 2. One of those people is Shalee.
And her alcoholic Uncle Mime is the other.
Shalee is currently trying to sweep the porch, but her old uncle's in the way. He wants to sit down on a step and guzzle booze without getting an asthma attack, but Shalee wishes he would just go inside. As she's sweeping, she spots the men approaching them.
Upon seeing the approaching riders, Shalee goes inside and grabs a couple of rifles, and then says they better take care of the horses, in case those men are horse thieves.
As the 5 guns arrive, there's no sign of any stage or indeed any person living in the town. Govern says that he'll do all the talking, I guess if they find somebody.
Anybody here? He calls out, dismounting his horse. From her home, Shalee breaks a window and fires a warning shot with the rifle. Govern asks about the stage from California. The California stage isn't due for 2 more weeks, so if that's what you want, you should get out of here and come back then, she says.
Govern asks if they can rent a room, but she tells him this isn't a hotel. She threatens to kill Govern with her next shot. Meanwhile, Hale has crept around to the back of the house, and seeing Uncle Mime's gun poking out of a window, easily disarms him.
Uncle Mime calls out to warn Shalee that they're coming from the back, and as she turns around, Govern pops his head and gun-drawn hand through the window. He advises Shalee to drop her gun. He climbs to the window as the others let themselves in through the back door.
Govern reiterates that they just want some water and a place to rest. Shalee tells them that they can find both out back and to get out. Hale sarcastically thanks her for the hospitality.
They head out, but John Candy stays to eyeball Shalee head to toe, back to head, before Govern coaxes him outside.
He looks like a hungry lion looking at a gazelle.
Govern tells Shalee that they'll stay out there, and she and her uncle will stay in here, and there shouldn't be any trouble. Once they've gone, Uncle Mime says that maybe they won't be any trouble. They had them under the guns and they didn't do anything. But Shalee is convinced that they will be trouble. That last one looked at her like a snake she killed once. Uncle Mime runs outside to grab a bottle he stashed under the porch. He's going to need that.
You need a lot more than just one. And now the 5 guns are stabling their horses. Billy and Hale both comment on the attractive girl in their vicinity. Govern tells them to concentrate on their jobs, but Hale in particular wants to mix business and pleasure. After he puts his tack in the barn, Hale decides he's going to call on the girl and invite her to come to a dance.
As he starts off, Billy starts asking what dance. He hadn't heard about any dance. Is there going to be a dance?
I like dancing.
John tells him to shut up and help with the horses. Hale goes to the house and knocks on Shalee's door. From behind the door, she tells him to go away, but he's insistent that he talk to her, so she opens the door. He tells her she shouldn't frown all the time. He'll make lines on her face. But this commentary does nothing to change Shalee's expression, no matter what the consequences.
She fails to punch him, so he presses on. He asks to be invited in. To this, she says absolutely not. He says that she can trust him. She asks, how long since you've seen a girl? He confesses it's been a long time. Then I don't trust you, she snaps. She starts quizzing him. Where are you from?
Hale says he came here to be neighborly, not to answer questions. But where do you come from, she asks. Lots of places, says Hale. South, she asks. Sure, north, east, and west, too. Then why don't you go riding off in one of those directions, snarls Shalee. She goes back inside and slams the door behind her.
Hale threatens to come back another time.
Inside, Uncle Mime asked if she was able to find out anything, but she wasn't. This one is too smart to talk, says Shalee.
Returning to the others, Hale admits that he struck out, but he'll try again. Women are like royal flushes, he says.
You need a little luck, a lot of savvy, and an ace up your sleeve.
Hale has none of those things.
JC tells Hale that Govern is posting guard and that Hale is next on line to stand watch.
Hale's unhappy playing soldier. He wants the stage to get there now. JC tells him that he doesn't know how to be patient. Hale says that he's patient when the chips are on the table, but now he just wants the game to begin.
Later, as dusk is falling, JC is playing a mournful tune on his mouth organ. Inside, Uncle Mime is pouring himself another drink. You won't be much good if there's any more trouble, Shalee says sourly. Won't be none, says Mime. Those guys are just riders and they'll be moving on soon.
Shalee thinks that they aren't headed anywhere, so they're right where they want to be. She decides she's going to go out and try to pump some information out of them, despite Uncle Mime's objections. She grabs a bucket and goes outside, where Hale resumes his ardent pursuit of Shalee. He demands that JC plays something lively. He did promise her a dance, after all. No, he didn't, but let's just go with it.
Govern tells Shalee that he told her to stay in the house, but Shalee says that she'd love to dance. She hasn't danced in just ages. From inside, Uncle Mime watches as his niece begins to dance. Then he picks up a guitar and his bottle, and he goes out to join the party. He takes a seat next to JC. A little guitar sounds good with mouth harp, don't you think? He says. And the two of them start to jam.
Govern looks on grimly as John Morgan tries to cut in on Hale.
Hale tells John to get his own dance partner. There's only one girl, says John. It looks like there's going to be a standoff, and the music stops. Govern jumps in and tells them to continue the music. John Candy hasn't had his dance yet. So Shalee dances with John, and as the evening continues, JC gets a turn. After that, Govern announces that everyone's had their dance, so it's time for the lady and her uncle to return home. Uncle Mime says he didn't get a dance with his niece, and Govern tells him to go back inside and they can dance all they want.
That's so weird. Hale says that Govern never took a turn with Shalee, so Govern says that he gets the honor of walking her to her door. Uncle Mime goes to JC to try to get his hooch back, but JC keeps it, growling that it's not very hospitable to take it away. At her door, Govern tells Shalee that she almost started something that she couldn't have stopped. Shalee says she only came out for a bucket of water.
Govern points out that her uncle could have gotten the water, but Shalee says that she's used to doing things for herself. She says that this town used to be full of people, but when the mine went dry, everyone left and now it's just her and her uncle, who had to stay to tend the stage.
But she dreams of running off, running out in the field until she finds somebody. Govern says, yeah, it's pretty lonely here, and Shalee says that they were doing fine until some saddle tramps turned up for a shooting match. Govern says that she'll be first prize in that match if she doesn't stay in the house. She says she's not afraid of him. And he says, yeah, but I'm a little afraid of you.
Billy comes down to join the others. He says he heard the music from over the ridge, and he wants to know if they're going to have that dance now. Govern turns to Hale and says that he should have gone to relieve Billy. Now they've left that ridge unguarded. Hale asks why Govern doesn't do it. Because it's your turn, says Govern.
Hale accuses Govern of staying here so that he can guard the girl, and then they both admit to having ideas about the other. JC finishes the hooch and tosses the bottle on the fire, and says maybe they should all get some sleep.
The next morning, Govern sends John to relieve his brother, who I guess gets more watches than anybody because he was doing it the evening prior. Then he takes Hale and JC to go scout around. He wants to know every possible path in and out of this town so no one can come in or out without them knowing about it.
In the house, Shalee sees everyone apparently taking off. She says they left their gear behind, so they'll be back, but this might be their only chance to suss out why they're there in the first place. Uncle Mime warns her not to, but she goes out anyway to dig through their saddlebags.
Shalee starts rummaging through their gear when Billy appears in the doorway. Looking? He asks. She explains that she was looking for some tobacco for her uncle, and she would have asked, but nobody was around. Billy pulls out a small sack. Here, he offers. Take it. But she doesn't. You sure are pretty, says Billy. Shalee says she doesn't hear that very much around here.
Billy volunteers that he's been to other places and he can show her some. She bats her eyes and asks a few questions before getting him to blab that the rebels couldn't get nobody else to stop that stage. She asks if they're soldiers. Why aren't they in uniform? And Billy tells her, boy, you're dumb. We'd get shot down in a second if we were in uniform. Having achieved this much intel, she tries to go. But he asks if she doesn't want that tobacco. She says, oh yes, but now he wants a kiss in return. And he gets mad when she refuses.
Since Shalee's not into it, Billy decides that he's no longer asking. He grabs her and she struggles against him. John is watching this from behind the fence. And inside, Uncle Mime is watching too. I told her not to go out there, but she never listens to me, he whines.
Pouring himself another drink. Shalee bargains for her life as he puts his hands around her neck. She will kiss him. Just let her go. Eventually, John yanks his brother off of her and slugs him hard. Billy hits the fence and then drops. He's out. Then John Morgan turns on Shalee. You made me hit him, he says. His brother's funny. He gets to wanting things. He mentions how that wanting curls inside a man like cactus spines, as Shalee looks on dumbstruck.
Then Govern, Hale, and JC return. Govern asks John why he's not out watching the ridge. John doesn't answer, and Govern tells him to bring his brother too. Then he directs JC to cover the ridge. Govern asks Shalee if she's all right. Shalee says that they could all ride out of town and she'll be just fine. Govern says that she seems to get a kick out of parading around like a pony in a show, getting his men all stirred up. I don't seem to be stirring you up any, says Shalee.
Govern says that she might be getting him riled up, but he's still got to keep her from distracting his men. Also, he's tired of walking her home.
Shalee goes back inside, where her distraught uncle admits that he saw the whole thing, but there was nothing he could do about it. He tried having a drink to see if it would give him the nerve to go out there, but it just made things worse. And Mime smashes the bottle against the table.
Shalee tries to reassure her uncle that she's fine. Nothing happened. Outside, Govern tries to explain what they'll do once the stage arrives, but no one's looking at him as he draws a diagram in the dirt. Hale asks where Gov is going to be positioned. Governor says he'll be in the house.
With the girl, says Hale. Govern says he doesn't want the girl. Maybe, says Hale, but you don't want anyone else to have her either. Govern says that it's Stephen Jethro and the gold that he's concerned about.
Hale asks why can't we have both, the gold and the girl?
By now, Billy is getting anxious. All this talk, he's beginning to think there won't even be a coach. He doesn't like all this waiting and watching and watching and waiting. And he doesn't like that John pulled him off that girl. Hale says that Billy seems to have a lot of dislikes. What is it that John doesn't like? John replies that he doesn't like that Hale talks so much. That momentarily shuts Hale up, and Governor continues to go over the plans.
Inside the house, Shalee tells her uncle what the little one let slip. There's an unscheduled stage coming that they didn't know about, and the men are Confederate soldiers. Uncle Mime doesn't want to hear it. Shalee says that she plans to slip out tonight so she can warn that stage. Her uncle says that that's a bad idea.
That night, as Shalee plans to go, her uncle tries to stop her, but Shalee is certain that they'll leave them for dead if they take care of the stage as they're planning. Uncle Mime says maybe he should be the one to go, but Shalee says that she'd have a better chance.
Yeah, she actually does stuff.
She sneaks down to the barn, but is immediately waylaid by Govern. He asks what she's up to, and she admits that she was going out to warn the stage.
Govern says that she's clever, but she never would have made it. John Candy would have spotted her on the flatlands and put a bullet in her back from 200 yards. Shalee says that by the end of this, they're going to kill her anyway.
Govern says that he's been trying to keep her out of harm's way. Oh, I'm sure my life means so much to you, says Shalee. You may not act like the others, but you're still a man and they're all alike.
Word. Then he forces a kiss on her. I'm sure that'll help convince her that all men aren't alike. She seems a little surprised by this, and then Govern sends her back home.
Just then Hale strolls up. He says he too was out enjoying a moonlight walk, only he didn't have a pretty girl to accompany him like Govern did. Hale tells Govern that it looks like the girl is beginning to glitter like gold to Govern. So he proposes that, when they stop the stage, they shoot the others and Hale can take the money and Govern can take the girl. Govern says he doesn't have to make that choice. You might, says Hale. A bullet can't hurt gold, but... It looks like this has been a profitable night for you, says Govern. Money isn't everything, says Hale.
The next morning, Billy crabs to John Morgan that he's bored. John tells him to shut up. JC comes down from the ridge and says that if you're so bored, why don't you build a fire? John says that only he can order his little brother around. JC says that he was only asking a favor, but John says his brother don't do nothing unless John tells him to. JC says that some of the things John asked Billy to do seem to get Billy into trouble. Governor comes to break it up as Hale rides up to report that the stagecoach is coming. Governor commands everyone to assume their posts. Governor goes inside Shalee and Uncle Mime's house and forces them to get down low. The stage pulls into town and an officer demands that the men tend to the horses. Governor pops out the front door, gun drawn, and tells them to drop their weapons or else. One of the Union soldiers pulls his gun. Billy is the first to take a shot from his post. Ambush! Cries out the Union sergeant. It sounded just like that. Then the Union sergeant takes a bullet in the back and falls to the ground. A soldier tries to ride off, but once he's to the top of the ridge, John Morgan shoots him dead. The Cannys and Hale run up to the stage and shoot all the soldiers around, then climb up to the top to try to secure that gold. Governor takes Stephen Jethro into custody and arrests him in the name of the Confederate Army. Stephen Jethro claims that he's not Stephen Jethro, so Governor searches his pockets and finds the information that would, quote, hang 200 men in his pocket. Meanwhile, Hale and the Cannys have come up empty. There's no gold on this stage. They hop down and grab Jethro, demanding that he produce the gold or at least say where he left it. Jethro says he would have been crazy to bring the money with him. Something like this might have happened. He says he left the money in the bank in San Francisco, and only he can get it out. He planned to go back for it later. Billy complains that they came all this way for nothing. Hale decides he'd like to visit the California territory, and Jethro might make the perfect tour guide. And he says they can't go back south without the gold. JC says they also can't stay there in Yankee Land. Hale offers to see Jethro safely back to San Francisco, which seems to please him, but Govern says no dice. Jethro has to be tried for his war crimes. Hale is tired of Govern always telling them what to do. He isn't like the rest of them. All Govern ever wanted was to get this job done.
and he didn't even seem to care that there was no gold on the stage.
And he was keeping that girl from them all.
Hale deduces that Govern is a Confederate soldier planted among them to see that the job was done properly.
But Hale and the Candies aren't going to let Govern cheat them out of their money. Govern says he will take Jethro, and Hale says, no, you won't. Billy's just confused.
Govern pulls Jethro aside and points his gun at Hale and the Candies. Billy, who's a little on the slow side, asks Govern what he wants with Jethro. Hale explains the situation to Billy as Govern drags Jethro into Shalee's house. John says he could pick off Govern from there, but Hale tells him not to try. It's too risky. They need Jethro alive and talking.
In the house, Govern throws Uncle Mime a gun so that he can help defend against the others. Uncle Mime is unsure about his shooting eye. It's a little out of practice, he says. And then Govern finally tells Shalee his true identity. He's a Confederate soldier, assigned to bring Jethro in alive, and those other men are after his gold.
Hale steps forward into the street, asking Govern to come out under truce for negotiations. Govern suggests Hale come inside the house instead, but Hale says that's fine, they can talk this way. He tells Govern that they want Jethro so they can get his money. If Govern sends him out, they'll let Govern live. If not, then he, the girl, and the old man will die.
Shalee tells Govern that he's lying, but Govern already knows this. Govern and Shalee discuss who's on what side, but Shalee says North and South don't matter. This is their own private war that they have to fight.
Uncle Mime says he could use some target practice.
Govern yells out to Hale, no deal, and Hale retreats to the barn. Hale tells the others that he'll just wait Govern out.
Inside, Govern isn't too concerned with the way things are going. He says that Hale is leading them now, but he doesn't suppose that will last. JC is used to taking care of himself, and the Kennys have never been much for taking orders.
But he also says that if this goes on through the night, the others might try to burn them out.
Back outside, Billy is tired of sitting and waiting and sitting, but his brother puts him in his place.
Inside, Uncle Mime is keeping watch when Govern tells him to go to sleep. Uncle Mime asks his niece if he can have a little nip before bed. She allows it. So he takes his bottle and Steve and Jethro, and they go somewhere out of frame.
This leaves Shalee and Govern alone, and they share a moment. Shalee figured that Govern was a killer like the rest of them.
He touches her gently as she talks about her hopes and dreams, which now include him. They kiss. He tells her tenderly that he'll remember every shot she fired at him. But for now, they're just going to have to ride out this stampede.
Now it's daylight again. Hale is dealing cards to John and JC while Billy sits by nervously. Suddenly, Billy jumps up. I'll get him, he yells. I'll get Govern. He runs out in the street, gun a-blazing, and from the window, Govern shoots Billy dead.
He picks him off so easy. Very anticlimactic.
John Candy comes out. He makes a show of dropping his holster and gun, and then goes to his fallen brother. Uncle Mime asks Govern why he doesn't just shoot him too, but Govern won't shoot an unarmed man. He's just coming to get his brother, he says. John rolls over Billy's body, grabs Billy's gun, and runs toward the house. Govern shoots but misses, and John runs under the porch.
Govern figures out pretty quickly what John plans to do under there. He's going to shoot at them from underneath the house, and he orders everyone to stand still. Back with Hale and JC, Hale tells JC that they have to fight now. JC says that John may have made it to cover, but the two of them have a long way to go, and it's dangerous out there. Hale says that while John Morgan has them distracted, they should split up. JC can run up to the front of the house, and he'll go around to the back. Inside the house, Stephen loses his cool and runs for it, until he's almost hit by a bullet coming up through the floorboards.
Govern has an idea to throw a book onto the floor. When John shoots at the sound from beneath the floor, Govern shoots back at where the newly formed bullet holes appeared.
Back with JC and Hale, JC tells Hale that he wants to keep his life.
JC is concerned that he's not as young as he used to be, and he's not too keen on running that distance to the house. Instead, he puts his gun into Hale's back and warns him not to move around too much because his trigger finger is nervous and it'll jerk easy.
He'll leave Hale to collect all the gold, but for now, he'd better drop his gun. JC uses this time to make a break for it on horseback.
Inside, Govern decides they'll have a better chance outside, so he brings Shalee and Uncle Mime and Steve and Jethro out onto the porch. Then Govern goes below the house to try to get the drop on John Candy. As this is happening, Hale makes a dash and runs into the house.
Under the house, Govern and John exchange a couple of shots, but Govern has found shelter behind a big rock, and John is out in the open.
So Govern and John have a shootout from about 10 feet apart. A few bullets are passed back and forth, and then Govern successfully shoots John.
We're out of candies.
Back topside, Hale appears on the porch. He says there are 2 dead men under the porch, but one doesn't know it yet. Some dead men hear real well, says Govern, appearing behind them. Drop the gun, says Hale, putting his gun to Shalee's head. I don't have anything to lose, but you have.
He tells Govern that he can have the girl. Hale just wants the gold. Shalee warns Govern that Hale's going to kill him regardless, but Govern drops his gun anyway. But then Govern takes a swing and knocks Hale off the porch. They wrestle for a little bit. Then Govern liberates Hale's dagger and plunges it into Hale's chest, and he dies instantly.
Now Govern, along with Shalee, Uncle Mime, and Steve and Jethro, are burying the dead Union soldiers. It's a shame they came all this way just to die. As for Hale and the others, he hopes it's not too hot in hell.
Uncle Mime says that he put extra food and ammunition in their saddlebags. Governor tells Jethro to mount his horse, and then he kisses Shalee goodbye and jumps on his own horse.
He tells Jethro they've got a long ride, and after he's dropped Jethro off, he's got a long way to go to come back home.
Shalee and Uncle Mime watch them as they ride up to the top of the ridge and then out of frame, and that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about Five Guns West from 1955.
Five Guns West was Roger Corman's first movie as a director, and the third that he produced. American Releasing Corporation, headed by James H. Nicholson and Samuel Z. Yarkoff, bought his second film, The Fast and the Furious, which was the first movie released by the studio. Corman used the money they advanced him for Fast and the Furious to make his next films, and ARC signed him to produce 2 more films for them, the first of which would be Five Guns West.
Thomas M. Pryor, writing for the New York Times in an article published October 28, 1954, said, The Fast and the Furious, quote, was made by Palo Alto Productions, a new independent company operated by Roger Corman, which plans to make 3 other features during the next 12 months. Filming on the second, Five Guns West, is scheduled to start next month. And indeed it did.
In February of 1955, the Los Angeles Evening Citizen News announced in a blurb that Roger Corman, whose Five Guns West is his 4th feature production in the past 18 months, was a messenger boy at 20th Century Fox studio a few years ago.
Five Guns West was filmed in part beginning in late November 1954 at the Iverson Movie Ranch. According to the blog of the same name, Iverson Movie Ranch, quote, Corman's ability to economize on production costs was already evident, with Five Guns West shot almost in its entirety at 2 locations. The first half hour takes place at the Iverson Movie Ranch, with the rest of the movie set a few miles south of there at the Jack Ingram Ranch. Jack Ingram, who was a B Western regular for years before opening his location ranch, also has a role in this movie. He played Stephen Jethro.
Five Guns West featured some familiar landmarks from the Iverson Movie Ranch, including Wrench Rock, sometimes called Indian Head, where Jonothon Haze is ambushed by a native warrior. Sunset Peak, also called Elder's Peak, Cactus Hill, and Turtle Rock, along with rocks the blogger called Gorilla and The Head.
Corman said in his book, How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime, quote, I used a Mitchell 35mm camera, the industry standard then, and shot in Eastman color. We worked 10-hour days. I moved around the set quite rapidly from the very beginning, and the crew seemed to enjoy the pace. I had been in the editing room for 2 prior films, and just had a feel for working with the camera, because I don't know much at all about acting. I was not as comfortable working with the actors.
Sheila Graham, in her column published in December 8, 1954, wrote, John Lund, who had to have his neck in a brace after being thrown from a horse in his last picture, rides the same horse in Five Guns West. Lund also told Sidney Skolsky in the Los Angeles Evening Citizen News that upon arriving on set, he found out the script had been changed. The name of the storekeeper had been changed from McDougal to McHale. Lund asked why and was told a man named McHale owns the store here on location, and it's much easier to change the name in the script than all the signs on the store.
Really see that in the movie, though. There was no storekeeper. Anyway. In the book, Roger Corman, The Best of the Cheap Acts, Mark Thomas McGee quotes Jonothon Haze as saying, Corman, quote, sat with his eyes glued to the script the whole time, and that Haze, who also appeared in The Fast and the Furious, had his friend Bobby Campbell write a, quote, meaty part for him in the script for Five Guns West in return for getting Corman to give him the writing gig. According to McGee, quote, Campbell was the one who had to tell Roger to forget the script and to watch what the actors were doing.
McGee quotes Corman as saying, I was sick to my stomach the whole time. I was so nervous I couldn't eat. It rained the first day. I was on my way to the location when it started, and I pulled over to the side of the road and threw up. But I think it was natural for me to be nervous.
Corman told interviewer Konstantin Nazar in 2008 that, quote, about halfway through Five Guns West, I began to think that maybe I could do this. I was really wondering at the beginning if this was going to be a real mess. But after looking at the dailies, and they looked fairly decent, I began to think, well, this film is starting to come together. I think that was when I became comfortable.
In his autobiography, Arkoff wrote, Roger tried to teach himself how to direct in a single day by shooting an 8-minute short on the beach with some actor friends. He filmed Five Guns West in 9 days. Arkoff added, as with so many other Corman pictures, Roger was skimpy with extras. When I saw the rushes, I complained, for God's sakes, Roger, extras are cheap. Give them a beer and a lunch and they'll do almost anything for you. Flesh out your scenes with a few more bodies.
Arkoff said, instead, Roger, quote, purchased stock footage of Indians on the warpath, and in the editing room, he spliced them around close-ups of the few actors actually hired for the movie. As for the few extras he did get to ride into and out of the sunset, most were Easterners who'd never been on horseback in their lives, except perhaps on a merry-go-round.
In an interview published in Film Facts, Haze says he staged all the fights in Five Guns West, saying, "If I stage a fight and I'm in it, I never lose." Which was funny because Touch Connors, he was this big guy, and I was just this little guy, but I'd lick him in all the fights, and I think that kind of ticked him off.
Do you remember this movie? Because he got his clock cleaned at least twice. According to columnist Mike Connolly, writing in January 1955, quote, Dorothy Malone's Levi's were boiled first for skin tightness in Five Guns West. And in an interview with columnist Hedda Hopper, published in March of 1955, Texas native Dorothy Malone said, quote, in Five Guns West, I decided to play the girl with a real drawl. They kept explaining to me that the boys were from Texas, but the girl I was playing was from the North. It didn't come out that way.
Screenwriter R. Wright Campbell is quoted in Gary Smith's book, American International Pictures, The Golden Years, as saying, I got only $200 for the script. I said to Roger, Jesus, Roger, that's not a hell of a lot of money to live on. I had noticed that all of the actors, because they were in the guild, made more money than I did, even the bit players. He said, do you want to play a part? And I said, why the hell not? Campbell, credited as Bob Campbell, played John Morgan Candy.
According to McGee, Five Guns West was finished on time, but Corman had gone over his budget of $60,000, so he did not have enough money for the third picture in his deal with ARC, Apache Woman. Variety reported that Corman spent $75,000 making the movie.
Five Guns West was released on April 15, 1955. However, ads for theaters in Boston, Portland, Maine, and other New England cities showed the movie appearing as the co-hit with Paramount's Conquest of Space on March 16, 1955. In mid-April, the film began running as a second bill feature with various films on the Eastern Seaboard and Pacific Northwest.
However, in a 1973 interview with Todd McCarthy and Charles Flynn for their book, The King of the Bees, Working Within the Hollywood System, Corman said, quote, I did Five Guns West in color, and the very fact that it was in color put it top half through most of the country, although in some major city situations, such as the New York City circuit break, it became a second feature. Honestly, I looked at a whole bunch of ads when it first came out. It was almost always the second feature.
But we did find that Five Guns West was the first build on a double with The Fast and the Furious at the grand opening at the Rocket Drive-In Theater in Grand Junction, Colorado.
So he was right in one instance. Taglines for Five Guns West include the violent story of 5 killers and a girl who met them kiss for kiss and bullet for bullet.
Govern, the big gun. Hale, gambler, murderer. JC, rustler, renegade. Billy, escaped convict, killer. John, a walking arsenal.
5 killers and that battle cry girl.
Photographed in widescreen color.
The fire and fury of the West.
Blazing a trail notorious as the West has ever known.
Carrying fear in his holster. Don't know which one was carrying fear in his holster. Probably all of them.
According to an article published in Variety in February of 1956, Five Guns West had made $350,000 to date.
However, Five Guns West struggled to make back its production costs because of its position on the bottom of double bills, where it earned a flat fee instead of a percentage of the gross. Alex Gordon said in an interview with Fangoria in 2004, quote, it soon became obvious that single B pictures like these first 3, The Fast and the Furious, Five Guns West, Apache Woman, would not work out for the new company. They played the bottom of twin bill programming at $25 per booking. AIP would have to own both pictures to obtain percentage bookings. This would prompt AIP to revert to making movies as a package, to release as a double bill.
Box Office Magazine's review said, no matter at which point on the compass this quintet of shooting irons is aimed, it is not going to blow any gaping holes in cash drawer records. But then, it was hardly fabricated or budgeted for that purpose. To the contrary, the feature was obviously designed to ride rear guard on dual bills in the adventure market. What it lacks in movement is compensated by impressive performances of virtually every member of the cast, able direction by Roger Corman, and the adroit use of pathé color to photograph the film's rugged backgrounds.
Harrison's Report wrote in their review that, quote, this program Western should prove acceptable to those who like pictures of this type, particularly because of the fine pathé color photography. As to the action, it has its moments of excitement, but for the most part is slowed down by too much gabbing.
Jack Moffat in The Hollywood Reporter wrote in his review, at the outset, we are told that the 5 outlaws must move through a land swarming with Comanches and Union cavalry. This raises audience expectations for excitement the film fails to deliver. There are but 2 long shots of distant redskins, and the fighting consists of a hand-to-hand struggle with one lone Indian.
Variety's reviewer wrote, quote, R. Wright Campbell's plotting is acceptable, but he permits his characters to talk too much. The result is that the pacing by producer Roger Corman lags often enough to make the unspooling seem slow. Corman doesn't supply as much drive to the action as this type of subject requires.
Columnist Jimmy Fiddler wrote of Five Guns West, Somebody, apparently, ran out of story material, or if they had it, couldn't assemble it into a cohesive plot. Promised developments in the long, drawn-out dialogue marathons never exactly materialize. Now, in the end, our desperate characters are liquidated, and the ending is not too hard to take.
Florida film exhibitor I. Roach said Five Guns West was, quote, filled with quite a bit of action and a plausible plot. Had no bad comments on it.
Edwin Shallert in the Los Angeles Times reported on June 13, 1955, that producer Roger Corman is planning another picture to follow Five Guns West. This is titled Reception and has a screenplay by Gene Howell. It will deal with a Confederate hero who brings his northern bride to his home in Georgia.
And needless to say, that was never produced.
And it sounds boring.
All right, Jeff, I think the reviewers in Five Guns West hit upon something important, and that is that this movie's not that exciting for a Western. It's just kind of inert, at least until the very end. Would you agree?
I would agree. There's a lot of dialogue driving the plot here instead of any action. And the most action we have is Jonothon Haze being nervous and antsy through most of the film.
I think that dance scene had a lot of action. Everyone got a turn to spin around with Dorothy Malone. But yeah, for one thing, I noticed that they would ride for about 4 seconds and then they would stop. And then we'd have a scene at their camp and then they'd cut to riding again. And then something happens and they stop almost instantly. So you get the sense that they're not really covering any distance.
Right. And something as simple as just a long shot that holds for a few seconds of them riding across this open space would give it that much more sense of time going by.
And space. They're supposed to be riding for 4 days or 4 days worth of riding in 3 days. And yet it seems like they're just picking around a movie lot, which is what they were. They never get up any speed. They never go any distance. They just seem to be having a stroll through a park and then things happen to them. So I guess it's not good planning for the production.
Well, we do have a first-time director working here, so that might be where part of that problem lies.
And there was a very small budget, of course. This is Roger Corman, who takes not much time with not much money to produce a movie. And he will be really good at that in the future. I just think he came up a little short here. And whether it's his newness or the fact that he didn't have a lot to work with, it could be a little of both. Do you feel like the script is to blame for any of that?
Maybe in part, and maybe as much as blaming Roger Corman's direction. Everything's adequate. It's not a very exciting Western, but it's not a bad one either.
I wouldn't say it's a bad movie, but it's not what you expect. A lot more interpersonal drama than traditional Western, in my opinion.
I wonder if it's supposed to be a shock to the audience that Govern turns out to be an undercover soldier. Because, of course, they're going to have somebody doing that. Nobody's going to trust these outlaws to carry on this mission. Even if you dangle the gold in front of them, you can't expect them to do what they're supposed to do and not run off with the gold. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that there would be somebody there to babysit them.
No, you'd have to be a moron. But then we're talking about Billy, so he probably never understood what was going on. But Hale and JC and John Candy should have twigged that right away. He was bossing them around from the get-go.
And among the 5 of them, he was the one with the least personality.
He's all business, yet he's the one that got the girl.
Well, he was the hero.
He was the least dangerous, I think. That was his qualification. The least dangerous man that you have met is the winner.
But still one of the only 2 that forced a kiss on her.
Oh, man. Did Billy actually kiss her, or did her fighting him off change his motivation to now he wants to strangle her?
Yeah, I don't think he ever did get that kiss.
Well, she lucked out.
He tried really hard.
She got very lucky many times throughout this movie. So it's not a Western per se, but to judge this as a drama, I think we have to go on the acting performances.
Well, if we're going to go by the acting performances, I think everyone does a very good job here, considering the low budget and 9-day shoot. I think that everybody is believable in their characters.
I do too, but I wanted to single out R. Wright Campbell, or Bob Campbell, the screenwriter / actor who played John Morgan Candy. I thought he was the best of the bunch. He had his brother on a short leash, and the control that took, the power in him, you could tell how much he was exercising that through his performance, and how he himself could easily have been just as nuts as his brother, but he has this all reined in so tight. And I just thought this was a really excellent performance from Bob Campbell.
I thought the 2 of them, him and Jonothon Haze, had kind of a George and Lenny vibe going on.
That is true. And knowing they're friends in real life, it makes kind of sense that they were able to play so well off each other. And Jonathan Haze was really good in this. He kind of plays this role in a lot of movies. I'm thinking of like Gunslinger, where he's just the annoying, obnoxious, kind of dangerous little guy that you just can't ever close your eyes on. This one was a psychotic gnat. And I totally believe that he really wanted to kill somebody or worse.
Yeah, Billy Candy is a very juicy part to play.
They must have been so grateful to each other for what they allowed each other to do on this movie. Their ins with Roger.
When watching an older film like this, there's usually some unintentional laughs, and there really wasn't anything that seemed out of place in today's age, except for some of the language, which you'd expect as they're talking about Native Americans as bad guys. But except for the film debut of James B. Sikking, who appears as the Union soldier who arrives with the stage.
Yeah, we know him from Hill Street Blues. Well, I will say one thing that was a little not contemporary to the movie was Dorothy Malone's full face of makeup. She looked like she lived in a deserted town with no access to cosmetics.
Now, Touch Connors looks like he has a bit on his face, too, in his death scene. He's got some pretty glittery eyeshadow over his eyes.
Well, he has to look like he's been beat up, so maybe that's just eye makeup for that purpose.
Anyway, back to James B. Sikking. He got kind of a Dudley Do-Right quality to his voice, which I just found so amusing.
Yeah, that was funny. And you do a good impersonation of him.
Ambush!
Because we know he doesn't talk like that. He didn't talk like that on Hill Street Blues. So I thought Dorothy Malone's character was interesting. She's just this young woman stuck out in the middle of nowhere with only her uncle, who's no good at anything except drinking. And here come all these men. And she's instantly on alert because obviously the worst possible thing could happen to her, maybe even worse than that. But she still has enough gumption to try to figure out what they're doing there and put her life and her honor at risk by going through their stuff when she thinks they're not there. So I liked how spunky she was, even if she wasn't too smart.
Yeah, and this is the third and final performance by Dorothy Malone that we'll be covering on the podcast. We saw her previously in Beach Party and Fast and the Furious.
Mm-hmm.
And of the three characters she plays, I think this was the least of them.
Well, that's true. I don't know if she would even qualify as having a lead role here. She's the lead female role, but...
Well, she has second billing.
I know, but her character doesn't really do all that much. But then again, most of the characters don't do all that much, and what they do, they just seem to do repetitively over and over again, just because there's not a lot to the story. But I don't know that she gets half the screen time, or even close.
No, even when she's got a rifle, she doesn't seem that threatening. She's no Beverly Garland in Gunslinger.
Oh, no. That is the creme de la creme of badass female performances.
Until the 70s and Pam Grier comes along.
Right, exactly. She takes up the mantle very well. But yeah, Dorothy Malone is no Pam Grier, nor is she a Beverly Garland. But she's pretty spunky. So now it's time to put a grade on Five Guns West using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic. What grade do you give Five Guns West, Jeff?
Well, as I said, this movie is an adequate Western. It's not exciting, but at least it's not boring. I think that the most boring part is probably when they're sitting around and not charging the house after Govern goes in and he's got Steve and Jethro and Shalee and Uncle Mime under his protection. And Hale and JC are standing outside trying to decide what to do about it. Because that goes on for quite a while where it's just a standoff and nothing's going on. You got John Candy under the porch and nobody can even move around in the house. But it doesn't go on too long. And all in all, I think the movie does move pretty fast because they don't show them making the distances. We said they stop, they find an arrow, they get on the horses, they stop, they find a dead body, they get back on the horses, they stop, they get attacked by that one lone Comanche. So the movie moves and it doesn't really slow down until they reach the town. And then that's when you get all the personal interactions that really make it more interesting anyway. So I'm going to give this one an I. I think it's a decent film. Definitely not great. And I had hoped for more from Roger Corman's debut as a director because the other Westerns that I've seen, Gunslinger, Oklahoma Woman, haven't seen Apache Woman yet. I really enjoyed those other two, so I was kind of hoping that this would be on par. It's not quite, although I think I gave Oklahoma Woman an I as well.
It had its downsides.
But this is an intermediate vote for me. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are much the same. The big problem for me was not that they were just sitting there, but that there wasn't enough to their characters for them to not basically repeat the same lines over and over again. Billy's crazy. John has him on a short leash. Hale is trying to work all the angles, and JC just wants to be alone to drink and collect his money. And then, of course, there's Govern bossing everybody around. And then we have Shalee coming out and prancing around like a show pony, etc. And Uncle Mime drinks a lot. And they just basically kind of repeat these same little interactions over and over again until finally we have to have the movie's climax and then it's over. And when you combine that with the fact that there's just not a lot of danger out there on the plains, we didn't even get to see the plains. It just seems like this movie is a great idea, but it needed to go back to the drawing board to add in a little more depth to the characters, a little more movement for the action, and it just needed a bit more than what it has. But this movie, to quote another podcast, is fine. It's definitely not a pathetic movie, and I think it's not an inauspicious beginning for Roger Corman.
You're not going to confuse it for a John Ford movie.
No, or any other quality Western of the era. But he was getting his footing as a director. He probably learned a lot, and he brought that to his next movies. And he made Gunslinger, which I think is just a fantastic movie. So I think he figured out some plotting issues, some pacing issues, and some action issues. And he made Gunslinger all the better for that. And so as a beginning, this is a middling grade. It's an I, but I definitely think it's worth watching.
I do like that JC apparently got away, so not everybody was killed.
No, he was really smart to get the hell out of there. And I think it was the only choice he could have made. It was certain death if he stayed there, and he's really likable. I wanted him to survive. I didn't really buy him as a bad guy, just a little greedy.
Well, if you're enjoying these deep dives into the early days of AIP and beyond, be sure to check out our website, aippod.com. It's where we're building a growing archive of film-by-film coverage, rare materials, and behind-the-scenes context to go along with each episode, so you can explore these titles even further. Besides promotional paraphernalia, there is also a Help Us page where you can find a list of films we're hoping to track down to cover in future episodes of American International Podcast. If you have a lead on any of these titles, you can use the on-site contact form to let us know about it, or anything else you'd like to contact us about for that matter. There are also links to our social media, as well as a link to our store where any purchase goes towards keeping the podcast going and the website free from a paywall. You can find all this at aippod.com.
Now I think it's time to put up the horses and kick off our boots until it's time to record the next episode of the American International Podcast, that is. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.